All right, welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. I'm Dan Deppman, and today joined by a very experienced real estate investor, Joe Holmes. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Well, I'm excited to have you on. I know you've got more than 4 decades of experience doing quite a few different things, but maybe you can just give us a little bit of a tell us a little bit about yourself.
So yes, I've been doing real estate for over 45 years. My dad taught me the business. He was a buy and hold investor. And my first property that I ever purchased, besides purchasing something for myself, my first investment was actually a no money down deal that I did about 40 years ago, and I still own that property today.
Oh, wow. So how did you work that out that it was no money down?
So times have changed. Back then, the banks didn't care if you assumed the loan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was an FHA loan, and FHA loans and VA loans are still assumable today. A lot of people don't know that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
working with probably 20 buyers right now looking for properties like that. And this lady had advertised this condo in the local newspaper. She was getting divorced and wanted to get out and advertise, take over my payment. That was the headline. And I looked at
Mm-hmm.
that and I go, wait a second, what does that mean? So I called her and she said, I already talked to the bank. They said, whoever comes in can have it. And I don't want it. I'm getting divorced. There's not a lot of equity in here. But at the time, it was actually cash flowing. So I said, okay, well, that sounds like a very interesting deal. It had a first on it and a second, believe it or not, on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first was okay with the assumption. The second, I actually had to go into the bank and do a little bit of negotiating with the bank. And this was with the bank president. Again, 40 years ago, local bank. You just can't walk in and talk to Jamie Dimon right now at
Yeah.
Chase. So it was a lot different. And we sat across the table from each other, and the interest rates, me being as old as I am, that was Jimmy Carter was in office, and interest rates
Mm-hmm.
were like 18%. And so the second was at 12%. And I said, I'm negotiating. I can't do 12%. I could, but I didn't want to. And I
Yeah.
said, let's just, redo this loan, do a modification. Let's bring it down to 7%. He said, no, I can't do 7%. He says, the lowest I can go is 10. And I go, no. I go, I think the highest I would pay is like 7.5. He says, no, I can't do that. And I literally just got up and started walking out the door. And he goes, whoa, 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 wait a second, wait a second. Okay, I'll do it at 7.5. And so we ended up doing that deal. That was about a 5-year note, second on that. And the first year was just a normal FHA 30-year note. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my my tenants paid for it. It's paid for now. And that was my first foray into no money down. Um, what we call it now is subject to financing. Uh,
Yeah.
it's a little bit different because the banks don't approve it, but that's kind of what I'm doing now as well, because I do flip houses. And instead of putting all my money into purchasing the house, I would literally do a subject to on the property and tell the owner that as soon as I'm done going in and rehabbing the place, I'm going to sell it. And, I don't plan on selling it subject to again. As soon as that loan is out of your name, then you're free and clear. Okay. And everybody gets paid back in a timely manner. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how I'm selling my subject to stuff.
Oh, okay. So when you do a subject to, you're not doing it with the intention of just keeping that on for years and years. It's like a window of time for you to do a
Yeah.
rehab and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's a lot easier explaining to them that it's going to be for a short period of time. Uh, it's easier for me to sell them on that. I done subject twos that are longer? Yes, I've done those. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have any right now I still have. I have investor partners that do have some that they sell and basically keep the paper on it, and we do we do wrap around the original first and do subject to as well on top of that, or seller financing. It really just kind of depends on the deal.
Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by that because it seems like subject to is like the new like sexy thing that
Yeah,
everybody's interested in. But it's interesting to me how people, were doing these like decades and decades ago. Just the other week, I was having a conversation with an attorney here in Colorado, and we were talking about something else, but I mentioned these to him, and he's like, "Oh, I used to write those for people back in like the early '80s,
yeah,
all the time." He's like, "People still do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they're doing a lot. A lot of those are being done."
yeah, yeah. They're they've been popularized. I'd say the last 4 or 5 years. Pace Morby is probably
Hmm.
biggest guy out there to do these things. And you always have the question in your back of your mind, and because I know this will come up, what about this due on sale clause?
Yeah.
And the 40 years I've been doing this, I've never had a bank call the due on sale clause. The reason
Hmm.
is, and especially nowadays, is it's almost like a checkoff system. Did you get the money I sent you this month, bank? Yes. Okay, we checked that off. There's really kind of
Yeah.
nobody looking in the background saying, oh, wait a second, we got the money from Joe, but Dan owns this property. How does that work? Maybe we ought to look into it. It just doesn't happen. I know Pace, I met him a couple of times, and I know that he's had like 4 or 5 issues with that he's been able to resolve. And he says all of them have been local banks. It's, credit
Oh,
union,
interesting. Not the big ones.
not the big ones. He says the big ones, they pretty much don't care. As long as they're getting paid, that's all they care,
Hmm.
you
Well, and
know?
that kind of makes sense from their perspective, right? Because if I have this loan out and I've been getting payments every month, if I call it in or if I do something that might trigger me not to get paid,
Yeah,
at that point if it
yeah,
creates a whole spiral. Yeah, and I've never done one of those myself, so I've bought, I was at around like 150 notes and I've originated a number of them, over the years when I've had REOs from non-performing notes and then sold them off, but I haven't actually done any wraps or subject tos. But when I've talked to people about it, they've told me things very similar to what you said, where um, doesn't happen the getting called in doesn't happen very often, but it does happen occasionally. I was talking to a guy the other day that runs a loan servicer, actually, I think in your neck of the woods, note servicing center. Um, and he's saying like they've had that happen before where they were servicing a loan and the underlying one got called in. So
yeah,
now
yeah.
what would you do if you were in that position where it did?
Well, I was just
Uh,
going to say, you always have to be prepared for everything. Uh,
mm-hmm.
you know, Thankfully, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I have the cash to, to pay them back basically if that's the route that they want to go. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, my focus is on flipping. So here in California, I don't know about the state that you live in, but we're a trust deed state. Are you guys a trust deed
Yeah,
state?
Colorado is as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty much the same rules here. So if they find out, it usually takes them like 2 or 3 months or whatever. They'll send you some letters, basically pay us back. They
Uh-huh.
don't go into the actual foreclosure process, which, as you know, probably it takes 3 months and 21 days for the bank from the initial filing of the notice of default. 3 months later, the notice of trustee sale that goes into the 21-day auction period. So
Mm-hmm.
believe me, if I'm in my properties and I'm flipping, if I'm in there more than 3 months, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So my two options are sell it before that happens, or just pay them off at the at the time, so that I don't lose the equity in the property that I have. So you definitely need to have a game plan available at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, in case that happens. But again, in my case, it's never happened in over 45 years. Not that I do as many as Pace does, because he does hundreds of them. But you always have to be prepared in case things like that happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because like if you do enough of anything, you'll eventually like bump into some of the corner cases on them. Yeah, what
Yeah,
scares me a little bit is sometimes like I've had conversations with people who are doing them and I don't think they do have the money just to pay it off if push comes to shove. And sometimes people go into those with the mindset of, well, that's unlikely to happen, so I'm not going to worry about it, but they might have a big problem,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know.
it's like, I'll get calls every once in a while. Hey, Joe, I just bought this place and I'm thinking about flipping it. I just wanted to kind of pick your brain for a while. And, my biggest question is, are you experienced in flipping? Have you ever flipped before? Do you have a contractor in place ready to go? Do you know about these things? And, I'm always kind of get fascinated with people that just don't prepare at all. And then they start reaching out to, me, because I'm very much available here in Orange County. And they
Hmm.
start reaching out to me, asking me questions, and I'm happy to answer all those questions. But I have to tell people, like, it wouldn't have been a good idea if you kind of learned a little bit before you pulled the trigger on this. I mean, I'm glad you did, but
Yeah.
it's always good to be prepared at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And then now did you say you've also created notes as part of these subject to deals, right? When you've sold them, do you?
Yeah, I mean, the notes that are created are really seller finance notes.
Hmm.
So if the seller's taking back, I'm having the seller take back a second or a third or whatever it
Yeah.
is, then, then there's a note there that can be negotiated and sold at the end of the day. I
Hmm.
don't do a lot of that type of financing myself. Um, I just I would prefer to have all my money at the time of sale. But if
Uh-huh.
it takes me doing seller financing to close a deal and, and let's say I have to take a note back for 20 grand, I do that. That's not a big issue to me. If that's what it's going to take to close the deal, then I would be happy to do that. I don't I don't
Hmm.
um I don't have a lot of them right now, and I don't really kind of sell them at the secondary market. My notes are for really a short period of time, anywhere between 2 and 5 years at the most. So I mean, I can wait it out and get all my money
Hmm.
then, instead of discounting it and selling it to somebody else.
Yeah, so you just hold them till they mature.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, because selling them on the secondary market can be a pain. Like I've
Yeah,
been selling some of my stuff lately, and
yeah.
I've kind of found if you've got really high quality paper where you can sell it to, an institutional type buyer,
Mhm.
or a fund, that makes life a lot easier. They're a little bit easier to work with and, move a little bit faster. But yeah, a lot of times if you're selling to individuals, it's kind of a challenge,
Yeah,
'cause they,
and everybody wants a deal. It's like,
hmm.
yeah, you paid, or this note's for 100,000 and it's at, 4 or 5% because that's what you wanted to do to make the deal work. And, they're saying, no, I need you to discount the note, and, the interest rate is not really attractive. So you need to discount that note a lot more than you would want to. So, yeah, I mean, I understand all that.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes I've seen people create them with the intention of selling them and they're, longer, like 30-year term deals. And when they're not familiar with seller finance, sometimes they kind of anchor on the current bank rates. And so they
Yeah,
might add a percentage point or two to bank rates. And so, yeah, they end up with that low rate. Whereas usually I mean, mileage varies a ton depending on what you're talking about. But like most seller finance notes, people are going to want a 10% plus, return, maybe a lot more depending on the quality. And then people get stuck with notes that they want to sell because they don't want to they don't want to sell it at such a discount that would be necessary to move it.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So where do you, so you've been at this a long time, like where do you see the market going in the next couple years? We've kind of had,
Well, not to get political, but let me give you a little bit of history. Again, I did talk about President Carter, and I was alive at the time and had some investments at the time when he was in office. And this is very similar to what Biden just left Trump, in
mm-hmm.
that interest rates are high, inflation's high, And knowing, what Reagan did right after Carter, and knowing Trump and, the first time he was the president, and knowing what he was doing, his goals, he is America's cheerleader. And I honestly, I'm predicting that interest rates should be down around 5% at the end of the year. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm predicting that this economy will turn around quickly and everything will still continue to go up. And I don't see any downturn like we did in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any issues ahead for investments or investors or anything like that at all. If anything, the opposite. I think you have to take Trump at his word, and he's going to make this economy and this country a lot better than it has been for the last 4 years. And again, I don't want to get political, but I've been
Mm-hmm.
through this before, and that's my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time seeing like a 2008 style
Yeah,
scenario just
yeah,
because the underwriting standards ha have been so tight, ever since then. Part of the reason I'm seeing so much seller finance activity is because banks have tightened way beyond like what was required by Dodd-Frank and some
yeah,
of the other things that they put in. So yeah, a lot of those factors that tend to exist when you have those big downturns,
yeah.
aren't
I,
really
I
present.
don't, I don't,
So,
I don't see us being anywhere close to that whatsoever. None. It's like for here in California, you know, the prices have gone up so much that there's no way that that's going to happen. There's too much equity in all
hmm
these houses. And even if people stop paying, most of them have, 10, 20% equity in their places. And they're not going to lose that. They're just going to put the property on the market. We're going to have more inventory, which is good, and more choices for the buyers that are out there, and they're still out there. There's a lot of buyers still out there that
hmm
are properties. So I don't honestly see a downturn in the next 4 years at all.
Yeah, from my perception, it seems like the bigger issue is the lack of supply. Like I know here in Colorado, I consider us kind of like a mini California. Like we tend to follow you guys. Like our housing prices are very high compared to a lot of parts of the country, not as high as California. And it's a challenge because they're building a lot, like in my area, but they're building a lot of McMansions and things, and that's nice, but that doesn't solve the problem
Yeah,
for
yeah.
most folks. So I'm curious if how you see like more supply coming into the market.
More supply is fine. That's not a problem. I don't think it's going to affect the market, going down in prices whatsoever. I just think there's, going to be more inventory, and there's still a lot of buyers out there that are looking for properties. If he gets the interest rates down to 5 or even less, then that'll bring out more people, more buyers. And if you have more buyers scooping up the properties that are there, that only drives prices up. It
Yeah.
may, it hopefully is not as crazy as we have here in California, because, depending on the business cycle for real estate, at one point in time, I had a property that was literally gaining, 10% a month in
hmm
in
This was back
increase.
like pre-crisis, like right
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like, I mean, I bought a property in Vegas. Not that I wander out of California much, because I've got enough going here. But I
hmm
bought a property from a builder in Vegas in January. It wasn't set to be completed till November. I bought it for 100 grand at the time. And by the time it was built, it was 150 grand. And I literally just put it back on the market and sold it.
That's so yeah. So in the early, so I grew up in Florida, and in the early 2000s, I was living in Florida, and I wasn't doing real estate investing at the time, but I had friends like other engineers I was working with, and what they would do is they would go under contract to build a house, and you could do it for like 5,000 down,
Mm.
and at the time it was taking whatever it was, like 6 or 8 months to build the house, and then the value would have gone up by then,
Yeah.
and then they would just take possession of the house, sell it, and then rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And the problem one of my friends had, a lot of these folks who were doing this were kind of like amateur investor types. They hadn't really seen anything go down. But then on the last go, when the Florida market started to, because Florida, I don't know if California was similar, but Florida was like kind of at the front. It was one of the most frothy, and then it started to dive, pretty early on. He said, "Oh, well, I'll hang on to this and wait for the value to come up." And then of course, then it went down. And so a lot of people like did that a few times and then took a beating at the end. But yeah, like for me, like I moved out of Florida in 2004. I had bought a starter house in 2001. And yeah, in that time it ran up from like 130 to 180,000. And I'm like, this is great. That was in '04. And then during the course of '05, I was watching it and that thing ran up from like 180. I think it was pushing like 300. And I'm like, oh man, I should have kept that place and rented it out or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
of course, then everything dove off a cliff and yeah, it was definitely interesting times.
Yeah.
So
It was. It was.
cool. Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate you being able to lend, some of your experience from all those decades back. So, yeah, how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more or connect with you or they're looking at real estate in California?
Yeah, they can go on my website, Joe Holmes, JoeHoms.com. That's got all my information there. And you can reach me there. That's probably the easiest way. I'm older. I do Instagram, but I don't do it like the young kids do nowadays. And then I also do YouTube as well. So YouTube// Joe Holmes, JoeHoms. You can find me there, and I do put out a lot of YouTube content and education, specifically dealing with California and what we're going through here. Again, I do a lot of fix and flips, and I train others how to do that as well. So if you're local and you want to reach out, please do so.
Okay, awesome. And I'll put links to that stuff in the description as well. So
Okay.
great. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Okay. Take care.